So my name is Bennett Mensah. I'm a children's book author, and the name of my business, if you like, is Books by Bennett K. Mensah. I'm based in the UK, and I'm preparing to launch my next children's book.
Hey, it's Kellen, and today on Diversified Game, I have Bernard Mensah, all the way from the UK, a small city in the UK, not the big London or Manchester, but he's tucked where a writer should be. And he writes children's books and has a company that they're going to come out with books. They'll later, I'm sure, turn out to movies. We're going to get the game from our brother, with the Ghanaian background, who just happens to be in the UK. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing very well. We've had some good weather this week, so can't complain at all.
Awesome. And anybody who hasn't been to the UK, it's like being in Seattle here in the States. You're probably only going to get a little bit of it in the year. So, whatever good weather is, because it's what you
Absolutely.
Tell us, how did you get into the children's book market?
Sure. So it all started with my little boy. So obviously I had him when I moved to where I live right now, and he's always loved books. I have always loved books, and as we're reading like lots of books before bedtime and stuff like that, I never really thought about the diversity on his bookshelf until one day he came home from school, and then he goes to this little small village school, like with 90 children across the whole school. In his class are like 15, and that's it, so he's the only child of color there. And so he comes to him one day and he goes like, "Daddy, why am I not peach?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And it takes me a little while to figure out what he's trying to say. And so we had a conversation about it then. And afterward, I looked at his bookshelf and I'm like, I need to do something to change the representation on his bookshelf. So I got some books which were based by black authors, featured black characters. And we sort of started going through that conversation and having that conversation about how he's unique, he's wonderful, he's fine just the way he is, that kind of thing. And as I was doing it, I realized that there weren't very many stories that were told from an African perspective. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And naivety is always I didn't do a lot of research before I started, I'll be honest. And writing picture books is hard. Like, people think writing novels is hard. Writing picture books is very, very hard, because the way you need to speak to the kids, the way you need to use your words, the way the illustrations play a big part of it. It's a lot of stuff that you need to know as a children's book writer. So yeah, that's when it started about 2 years ago, and since then I've had a few books which have been thankfully taken on by traditional publishers. But in traditional publishing, things take 2-3 years to come out. And the other passion that I have is obviously making sure that Ghanaian children have access to really good quality books that represent them. So I have another business that I run, which is called Hapaban Nerds, which is a publisher purely focused on African literature and looking for accessible quality African literature to print for children in Ghana and across the world to understand the African perspective.
Now, my audience, those, I have majority listeners, but the people know I write books, and my wife and I, we write children's books as well. And so the next questions I have are going to be all about me, and hopefully they bless you too, people, because I too created a publishing company. But the reason I did it was because the CDC sent me an email and said, on your third book, we'll make you a member because you have the only nonfiction travel book of kids of color. I said, you mean black kids? They're like, yeah, that's what we need. We got to say a color. I'm like, yeah, our kids are black. I said, my wife is from Cameroon, and we love to travel. And so my thing with having your, being and put in these other little cliques and being able to whatever control, but I want to get in because you've done some very hard things. First of all, to get a traditional publishing deal, how many letters did you have to write to get that deal? And then I'm going to have more questions off that deal, but just let the people know, how many letters did it take?
Sure. So I was sort of lucky. So what happened initially was I was looking for an agent, and I wrote this story, and I was like, this is not going to be very hard to find an agent. It was super hard. I went through like 50 rejection letters, and part of it was, again, my naivety in the beginning, not understanding the structure of a picture book and what traditional publishers are looking for in terms of how you structure your picture book, how you put context into that picture book. And so once I figured that out, I went to a number of courses, and once I figured out that bit, I did one of these Twitter pitches, which I don't know whether you hear of them. They're called PitMad, DV Pit. There's a whole lot of them that they do on Twitter. So I put out my book there, and I managed to get an agent through that. It was an interesting experience because when she asked for the story, she said, can you send me 2 or 3 things else that you have? And I'm like, I don't have 2 or 3 things. So I basically spent a week writing 2 or 3 things and sending them off as well. And she signed with me, and I told her from the get-go that I'm also going to self-publish because not everything I write will be suitable for traditional publishing. And we had that conversation, we had that understanding, that clarity before we sort of got into a partnership together. And then 2 months later, thankfully, we were able to sell 2 books to traditional publishers. I have a few more going to traditional publishers at the moment.
Okay, and I want people to like really visualize this, because that's a great thing to say. You're not going to own me. I'm going to submit what I want to submit to you, and you have a choice to take it. But so often, I know authors in this space who, Kelly and I get $5,000 a book. So whenever I'm done, I get $5,000. Whatever I do, it's like the music industry, right?
Yeah.
And my little one was so good. She brought, this is them.
That's really cute.
Thank you. And this is them eating. In the restaurant, you see the whole fish.
Nice.
Fish has the thumbs up because fish love to be eaten, whatnot. But and I have the hard copy as well for the libraries, because here the libraries like to buy hard copies because kids eat up little, Amazon copies. Can you give the people, and I don't want them to know all your business, but I like to burst people's bubble, because people say, Kellen, well, you have books and you have movies and this and that. I'm like, you need to understand that you don't get rich off writing books today, unless you have some huge name already. Yeah. But you don't get rich. So I know authors that have said in books that are on major things that have made $13,000 off books. Yeah. John Acuff is one of them, and he was with Dave Ramsey, a big guy out here in finance, someone I follow. And so what range would you tell someone who's like, I want to make a book, and them thinking, oh, I'm about to make $100,000 from this book? What range, if they are so lucky to get a deal, could they be looking at the profit at? What, just a range?
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers you've mentioned sort of are the what for a traditional publisher, you're talking 5,000 to somewhere 15, 20,000, depending on really, like you said, how good your writing is, and how good where it fits in the market, and what brand you have. If you're talking about self-publishing, then the margins are significantly less. So, for example, my first book, I barely broke even, and that was a learning experience as well. But I wasn't doing it to have profit. I was doing it because that was something I was passionate about, and I wanted to put that story out there. The second book, I'm hoping to make a little bit of profit so that I can continue to do what I do. And so I'm taking a slightly different approach in terms of marketing to ensure that I've got I'm hitting the right points in terms of the market and who I'm sort of talking to, like you, about the story and about what I'm trying to do with it.
And the marketing, so my whatever real job, I run a consulting and PR firm, but the marketing is that's something totally like I have marketers, but we even sometimes go outside to see if there's anything new because we don't know it all. And
Yeah.
marketing can be so expensive. Can you break down the range? Because people say, well, if I get traditional publishing, they're gonna give me a sign-on bonus. No, they may not give you, they probably won't.
Yeah.
But even if you do it yourself, how much are you spending in marketing before you even get to, see the fruits of your labor?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not a marketing expert, but for the little I know, it's about the number of impressions that you are able to push out before people actually think about buying your book. And traditionally, you're talking about 20,000, 30,000 impressions at a minimum. So people seeing your book a number of times, or the story a number of times before they start to think, hey, this is something I might want to buy. And so you're talking anywhere in UK pounds anyway. The cheapest digital campaign you could do, which would get you that number of impressions, and that's just digital. There's no print, there's nothing else. That's around probably £400. And if you want to get really into making sure that you get lots of people looking at your stuff, then you're talking close to £1,000 and upwards. And that's you directly go into places where you can market stuff and say, hey, I want to do some marketing, put this out there for me. If you're talking about with a PR firm, you're going way above there. You're talking £1,000 plus in terms of a marketing budget.
And let this be a teachable moment. So, if you're spending £400, you guys have to understand that that's 500 something dollars. The pound is always so strong. Um, I almost had I had a royal joke, but I'm gonna leave that alone. Have to live there. But off that £400, how many books are you selling? Because that does not always add up to, if I spend 400, I make break even. So in your experience, can you let the people know so they won't think, oh, Kellen, you're so negative. You always tell us, no one can guarantee this. You spend 400, what happens sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, no advertising will guarantee, and no real advertising professional will guarantee you a number of sales based on the number of impressions you make. So it can, if you're lucky, you get 10-20% conversion rate from the adverts that you put out there. So that if, for example, you were trying to sell 500 books, out of the £400 or £500 that you spent, you probably sell 40 if you're getting a normal conversion rate. If for some reason the message sticks and you can people it starts to resonate with people, then you can think you might get a bit more. But I generally tend to be pessimistic about the power of marketing, because I know I'm not spending the hundreds of thousands, well, not hundreds of thousands, I'm not spending thousands of pounds on it. So I try to be intentional about where I spend it, and I hope that I can break even.
And that break even, that's sometimes just the prayer to say, let me just break even so I can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, can you talk about the relationship with the traditional publisher? Because I would think, some folks would hear that and say, well, you mean I could make $5,000 off my book? I'll just write a book a week, a book a month. Talk about the process of them approving your book and how many revisions you had to do to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, traditional publishing is hard work. If somebody is thinking of making quick money off of traditional publishing, they should definitely not think that, because you can't do that in traditional publishing. So, for example, when I sold my book, it went out to the market, and it was on the market for 3 months before it sold. And even whilst it was on the market, I had to do revisions to it. So an editor would come back and say, can you make this more prominent? Can you touch on this topic a bit more? And I had to do all of those revisions before it sold. And then when it sold, it took about 4 or 5 months before the money gets to you. So you're not going to make a living off selling books to a traditional publisher. And then the advance that you get, when you do get an advance, it's not always guaranteed, but when you do get an advance, it's always split up as well. So it's split up in 3 bits most of the time. So when you sign the contract, you get a quarter of it. When you deliver the revisions, you get a quarter of it. When the illustrations are done, and a copy review has been done, then you get another quarter of it. So even over that 6-month period, so you basically, what I'm saying is it can take a year for you to get that $5,000, and that's not a unnatural time period for each book.
Okay, and let's go even deeper on, how long it takes to get paid, because even if you're self-publishing, I mean, those royalties just kind of like flutter in. It's like Christmas where you're like, oh, I got some money. And it's not
exactly.
like, it's not like it's money where, I'm going to go buy the new Aston Martin, but, it's money I can put towards my kids and, help them in life, because that's what we're doing it for. I think both of us are writing for the kids. So what do you do with the money? Because a lot of folks have a hard time, I find, like saying, wait, what do you mean have a separate bank account just for that? And let it pull from that. Like, how do you structure that in your mind? Because I'm sending this interview to people that they struggle with my method, because my method is, we don't need to eat this money. This is like fun. We're doing this for fun. So how do you, put that together on the banking side?
Yeah, absolutely. So the message about keeping a separate bank account is definitely something I'll echo, because it keeps your accounting simple, first of all, for taxes and everything else. So I do have a separate bank account. When the money comes in, I apportion a number into different buckets. So some of the buckets I have are training, for example, because being a good writer is expensive. There are courses that you might want to go on to learn more about your craft, presentations, seminars, that kind of stuff. So I have a little bit that I put aside, just so that when I do see something come up, that money is going towards that, so I can invest in myself. I also have a bit where I put aside for the next book, in terms of the illustrations, because illustrations are expensive, as you probably know. The printing, which is another cost that you have to basically swallow when you start to print as a self-publisher. Marketing, all that kind of stuff. I just put some aside for that next book, and then the rest is what I put is what I leave as my how shall I put it? It's like my celebration budget, and that's like 10% of everything that comes in, and that's for me to enjoy whatever I see fit to buy. Invariably, it comes to buying more books, but at least it's a way of saying, it's celebrating yourself, really, because you've done a lot of hard work to get to the point where somebody's actually buying the book in the first.
I love that. And you guys are going to have to bear with me real quick, because when you're recording outside, which I do this podcast, and it starts to rain in Florida, you have to adjust your table. So you guys are getting that adjustment view. Okay. Let me put that. Boom. So can you go even talk more about the not just the taxes, but when you're doing your budget and you're having to deal with your wife, your spouse, is she all on board on this, or did she think you were crazy when you said, I'm going to write a children's book?
The latter. So and I think I was crazy when I said I was going to write a children's book, because if I had known, and I'm just being frank with you, if I had known like how hard it was going to be, I probably wouldn't have done it up front. But because I was so invested, by the time I started to figure out how hard it wasn't something that I could feel that I could back out of, especially since I was doing it for my son as well. So yeah, sorry, what was the question? I just had someone come in.
Okay, yeah, no, you answered the both, because for your spouse to say, I'll say this, my first children's book, it was $150 a page, and I went through maybe 2 artists at like long spans. I wanted to start it. Hardest part of the life came, took a dip. And then when I found a Black artist who could do this, I said, oh yeah, we're rocking. And it was the same price that I paid the other person. So that means we don't go get discounts, people, just because us and hey, can you do it any cheaper than the last? No, you treat everybody fair. But like when you say, okay, I want to spend $150 a page, children's books, there's so many pages you can do. You start, you can hear things like, why? Why do you want to do that? So I just love that you're so open, and hopefully your wife won't get too upset. I know mine won't, because I'm just telling the truth. And I
Yeah,
co-wrote the book because I wanted my wife's opinion,
yeah.
because I'm not that artsy kind of guy that is gonna make everything neat. I wrote all the ideas out, but how do you go about creating your books? Do you write the story first, as far as the words, or do you have the scenery and the background and scenario?
It depends. So some of my stories, I I have like a very clear picture of what the art should look like and what I want to say with the art, and then I write a story based on that. But most of the time, it's I've got the words, or I've got a phrase that I want to sort of work on, and the story is built around that phrase, that concept that I want to do.
Man, that's a great process. And with the publishing the books, I had mentioned in the opener, about movies and possibly maybe even cartoons. When I think about movies, is that something you see yourself doing?
Yes. So the one thing that when it comes to animation, for example, is like it's even more expensive than illustration. um, so one of the things I'm trying to move into, and I found an artist who I can work with fairly recently, like two or 3 weeks ago, is graphic novels for kids, because the price per page is relatively, well, it's like half the price of a picture book page. So you're talking $150, about $45-50 for a graphic novel page with 3 or 4 characters on there. And I've basically got a few stories that I want to do that for the younger age group. And hopefully from that, once I start to get a bit of traction in that space, we can start to think about um, animation from some of the profits that we get. Fingers crossed.
Yes. Now, another reason I created the publishing um, is because I said I know I have 22 books, because it's all based on our travels at the time, and we have even more now, like as far as idea. And I
Mm,
want to be able to control it.
yeah.
Do you feel with your traditional publishing deal that TV will come around to you and say, "Hey, we actually want to buy into this"? Like, they've majors have got into a few African based cartoons. Can you see that being a lane? Have you seen anybody, approach you saying, we could turn this, if you sell us the rights, we could, make this and put it on even a bigger platform? Again, as long as we can own you instead of you owning your idea.
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't happened yet, and there are a few reasons for that. First of all, and this is something that I learned from like selling the first book, or the first 2 books to a traditional publisher, is that obviously a publisher wants all rights to the books, and for the books that I sold, I did give them all rights. But I think going forward, I understand more now what that means when you say you're selling all rights to a publisher, and I didn't really understand it the first time around. But now that I do, um, I think I'll be looking to capitalize on that personally, because it probably will be easier for me to have more creative control over who has the reins to this kind of thing. To answer the other part of the question about African sort of animation studios and stuff like that, there's a Ghanaian studio that a few months ago got an Amazon Prime deal. So there is potential there, and large companies like Amazon are starting to reach out to various copywriters or copyright holders to see what IP they have, and how they can sort of make that something more global.
Okay. And you just dropped a bomb talking about that the Ghanaian company who got the deal with Amazon. You're gonna have to say their name if I get it wrong. If is it the Rapper Uchi dot Africa? No. What's the?
I can't remember the names. If I can find it, 1 second.
Okay. Because that's major. I know working, in this business behind the scenes, I know the people who help African filmmakers get deals
Yeah,
on Amazon and Netflix.
yeah, it's called Mofra. So Mofra.
MMOFRA.
FRA, and that's just it's a Ghanaian language called tree, and it means child, children. Mufra
Okay. And is that the Mufa Foundation or studios?
is a studio, so it's
Okay.
yeah.
You guys are getting real game out there. So if you want to write books or children, or even if you're an artist out there, now you know who might be hiring, and you can go reach out and say, "Yo,
Yeah,
let me,
absolutely. And,
yeah."
and and my one of the things that I'm doing with my company is also trying to find talent on the African continent. So we've reached out to a number of illustrators and authors in Ghana, because it's not just about my stories; it's about Ghanaian stories, Nigerian stories, African stories. And we want to try and train people where we can. So share the little that we know, make sure that people are submitting the best work that they can, and they are competing on the global stage.
And that's what it's about. Because even when you're talking, I'm never opposed of even partnering, because I know the ideas, the experiences that we have. Many what I consider my children, the real African American children, they can claim that title, is to show other children, yeah, you guys can travel too, and don't be scared of the plane, and don't be scared of the different foods and eating with your hand, because the fufu and you guys call it ukazi, we call it aru in Cameroon. This is the real food. It's better than that hamburger. So
Absolutely.
it all down, but don't forget the pepe. Gotta put it in. So you
Absolutely.
know, yeah. And so I would even, I like the energy and vibe. I wouldn't mind saying, hey, I want to put a book together and show with our different talents and the different networks. Because when we come in globally, it takes me to an old joke Martin Lawrence used to say. When we come in globally to a place that we might be the only ones, they look at us different versus us coming with, our hand out.
Yeah.
Oh, please, Massa, help me. But when
Yeah.
we come together, oh, you guys have unified, and everyone has their talents, everyone has their stories. Because I don't know the last time you've been on the continent, but you're still seeing cartoons from like the 80s and 90s in some places.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
and you're like, what is this? And I can see more, African stuff on YouTube, or something. But yeah, I love that. Now, with all the good that's going to happen with this series, and the best is yet to come, what
Thank
is
you.
a community? You're welcome. What is a community give back that you are doing, or that you plan on doing in the future?
Sure. So for every book, like I said, our my real priority is to ensure that there's good quality children's books in Ghana. So what we do is that we print almost everything that we send to Ghana at cost. And that means that publishers are close to cost, so that means that booksellers and bookshops can sell them for much cheaper than they would typically sell a price for. So the retail price is very low, which means that more kids can afford them. We also work with a number of foundations in Ghana where we send them books for free every time we do a print run. And I do what do you call it, Zoom calls where we read a book together just to get them passionate about reading. So this is all stuff I'm really passionate about, and I do what I can when I can.
Man, that's just great stuff. And some folks will say, "Well, I have a job," and you mentioned, having another business. How do you manage it? How do you find time to write?
Oh, that's a good question. I ask myself that question every day. Um, so I have a main job that I do. So I'm a software engineering manager, like that's what pays the bills. So I do that. And then once that day is over, I try to slide in an hour here, an hour there. Sometimes when the kids are asleep, sometimes I wake up early in the morning, and I try and do the other things that I need to do. On the weekends, I have like an hour slot where so I also manage a group called, I'm a co-founder of a group called Black Creators in Kidlit. And that's a group of a community of Black creators who write and illustrate across the world. So we've got people in Canada, people in America, people in Africa, basically everywhere. And I sort of work with them as well. So I've got a time slot for that as well. It's hard work. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of late hours. But somehow I manage to make it work most of the time. There are days that I'm just too tired and I just don't do anything or any of those things. But most of the time I manage to get a few hours in a week.
Okay, and so do you put it on your calendar, or do you to make the time? Because sometimes we live by these calendars, and if it's not on there, we're like, it doesn't exist. I almost missed the meeting today because it wasn't on my proper calendar,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was with like four other people, and I'm like, felt so embarrassed, but thank God they called me.
Well, I don't tend to use calendars for a lot of these things because the times you sort of have to find the opportunities for the time, especially since I've got kids. So it's when they're doing something or they're not really available or they've gone to school or something like that, then I can sort of chip in a 15-minute slot here, chip in a 15-minute slot there. I've got a meeting in the office, but there's that people aren't around and I can do a little bit of that during my work day, or they are asleep, like I said, or I've woken up early in the morning around 6 o'clock when it's quiet, and I've done some of that. So it's more about making the time to make sure I've got like goals for the week, so I know that the end of this week the X needs to be done, and it's about finding the time throughout the week to sort of make sure I reach that goal. But calendars don't really work for me, unfortunately, with my schedule.
Well, okay, now we're going to go deeper into why they may not work for a software engineer because I don't want to put you on the spot,
Go
but
for it.
let's say how many jobs do you have? Because every software engineer I know, he's working with at least two other computers. Sometimes, trying to look for the third and say, hey, let me double dip, let me triple dip. So how many jobs are, if we want to call them projects, so you don't get in trouble? Because I did have a software engineer get in trouble on this show saying, I saw you on a show and you're talking about how you got, this many jobs and made, almost $500,000 so a year. So how many jobs that you can talk about safely do you have?
I have one job that I can talk about safely as a software engineering manager, um, but I tend to support people where I can. So I'm again mentoring a number of people that have just finished school, um, and they're looking for jobs in the software engineering industry, and so I help them with CVs. I help them with practicing like interviews, and sometimes when they have like questions about bits of code that I have time for, I'll help them with that as well. Every now and then, when I feel crazy, I'll post on Twitter that if anybody needs somebody to look at their CV or something, you can DM me. But I haven't done that for a long time because well, I've got too much going on now.
No, that's awesome, and later on that might be a give back to help people with their CVs because I have mentees and I tell organizations before I mentor anybody, I don't know the last time I submitted a CV, and I have one somewhere deep in the files, but I don't know if it's up to par, and just to let you know, I might be limited in that area, so I love that. Now, who are the biggest buyers of your books? Are they folks in the UK, the US? Are they on the continent?
Good question. So I tend to find that people in the UK and and the continents tend to buy the books more. Um, and I think that has been the case because I have people on the ground in both places. I've not yet found somebody I can work with who is living in the US and can sort of be the face of all the books, if you like. In Ghana, we've got somebody there. In the UK, I'm here, obviously. So I think having that personal person there who is able to take queries, sort of make new relationships, and push the book makes a whole lot of difference. So for now, it's basically in the UK and Ghana that they sell quite well.
Oh, okay. And what we find, we're going back to marketing, a lot of Black business period worldwide marketing, we are like walking billboards for other people's brands. But when it comes to marketing our own stuff, the same $500 somebody may spend on a pair of shoes or socks, they won't spend on their business.
Yeah.
Have you found that any influencer marketing has worked at all?
So that's one thing I'm exploring for this book. I haven't. Again, this has been a learning curve for me in terms of getting through the marketing thing and trying to figure out how to advertise the product in a way that it gets people to take notice, or more people to take notice. So yes, that's definitely something I'm looking through actively at this time, trying to find good influencers who sort of are compatible with the brand that I want to portray, and see how much that costs. I've had some quotes come in already from some brands, and they're not cheap.
Not at all. And so marketing, and we're going to talk offline about some things that I'm personally doing with some clients that I'm even advertising, that is very affordable for business. But I love this, and I love the effort that you put into it. The reason why the majority of our children's books that even look like us are not written by us is because no one took that first step to try. So just that you tried, and people, the numbers are staggering, because you'll say, wait, it's like less than 2% of Black authors who write children's books. It's really, really low. And of course, you can go on Fiverr and get somebody to do your book. I know people who have had books done for $150, the whole book. I don't know if that's fair. And I don't think the way our process works, it's like almost slave wages, because of the time you have to tell your illustrator this, and this. And, I mean, it's not something I'd want to do. And I really love my illustrator. Because it's like your therapist sometimes.
Yes.
But give the people the game, where they can get your book and where they can tap in.
Wonderful. So I've got a website, which is booksbybernardkmensah.co.uk, and people can go on there and request a book. I've got a pre-order page that's coming up on Saturday. The Kickstarter will start probably on the 19th, Juneteenth. And so they'll be able to get it off there as well. There'll be information on my Twitter, which is the same, Bernard K. Mensah Writes, Instagram, Bernard K. Mensah Writes, on Facebook, Bernard K. Mensah Writes. So lots of ways to get in touch and see what I'm doing, and hopefully we can all together make this thing wonderful.
You guys don't forget the K, because if you see
the
football player, you'll say, hey, I didn't know he played football too. He's complaining about what? But you guys have been blessed by the game. We're going to take this offline. Thank you, brother, for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Hi guys, I'm Kai Gabiam from the Diaspora channel, a lover of Africa. If you love Africa as well, and you would love to visit one day or to relocate to Africa, there is a course out there for you. And this course is My First Trip to Africa, a course well put together by a seasoned traveler, Kellen Cash Coleman. This course is designed to prepare you to travel better, which will save you both time and money. And the great news is this course costs only $20, guys. It can't get any better. Go right now and enroll to this course at www.diversifiedgame.com. Don't miss out.